Awesome. Okay, it is 7:01. Let's get started. Call the meeting to order, and first item is roll call.
Here. Okay. Jen Bates,
Here.
Matt Bowman. Okay. Rich Gussenberg
Here.
and Harrigan.
Here.
Jim Jenks.
Here.
Andrew Martelli.
Here.
Renee Martinez. No, Renee's not here.
Nope.
Okay, Charles Neff. Chuck.
Here.
Sylvia Nichols.
Here.
Katie O'Donnell.
Here.
Jeff Pengaro.
Here.
Anthony Perugini.
Here.
And Don Walsh.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. If we will all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. So the first item on our list today is the Communications Subcommittee report. Rich, you're up.
Okay. We, I think, have had some good successes. We're up to over 500 followers on our Facebook page, and we've been putting quite a bit of information on there. The survey is moving along. As of this morning, we had 724 people who had completed the online survey. Then that doesn't count the 400 that are being called. And 70 of those are business people in town. The average is about 11 minutes per survey as they're doing it. So it's not onerous in any way. I do want to thank Jeff, who's taken on the coordination of the survey and getting a lot of the information out. And I've seen a number of you have posted or reposted things to remind people. So I think that information is getting out there pretty well. We had set a goal of trying to get 1,000 people to fill out the online survey, and I think we're, going to hit that or hopefully even exceed it. So I think we'll have some good numbers there. We had been talking for a while about doing a video, and Ann Harrigan stepped up. And she and Jeff Solon got together, and I sent out a copy of it to everyone. Very, very professionally done, 15-minute video, kind of doing an overview of how we've gotten to the point we're at now and some of the issues regarding the two different scenarios that we're looking at. So that, I think, is a really nice piece, and that's been sent out to all of the parents in the school district. And I've posted it. I don't know if I posted it yet. If I haven't posted it, I'm about to post it on our Facebook pages. We have been doing a letter to the editor campaign. Kate last week had an excellent letter that was in the Herald on our numbers at the elementary level and the impact that those are having. Jim has written one on the SMC process up to this point. Hasn't been posted yet in the Herald, but we're hoping it will be. It is on the patch, and hoping we can get that into the Herald also. And not part of our committee, but Dr. Solon also did a very long, detailed piece that was in the Herald. So I'm pretty pleased right now. I'm very appreciative of my committee that's working very hard. And I think hopefully we're going to get some good information out of the survey. We'll continue getting some letters to the editor. We'll continue posting on Facebook. And we may look into doing some other videos as we move along. So that's where we're at.
Great. Do you know how many? One second. Do you know how many people have been called and answered their phone yet? Did you get that from?
I didn't get that number. No,
Okay.
I talked, Brooke, who is one of the associates, had sent us a note this morning, just how many people had done the online, but she didn't mention, she just said that doesn't count the 400, but she didn't mention how many they've actually reached yet.
Okay. Jim, did you have something?
That was the same question I was going to ask. Is
Oh,
how far
okay.
how far they've gotten with the phone survey.
Okay.
They did-
And
They did call my house last night, so I know they're
oh,
working.
wow. That's awesome.
I made my husband do it.
They called you, Sylvia?
No, they did not, but that was my question as well. That was-
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I don't know if
Don,
anyone on the committee would get called. That would be interesting.
Hey, Rich, do you know that the 700 plus online are, when they give us the final results, are they going to give us do that separately, the 700 online versus the 400 that they
Yes.
called? So
Yeah,
we'll
they're
get two separate. Okay.
Yeah, they're totally separated because the 400 is automatically very statistically relevant. The 700, you don't know who's out there, although their experience has been that it pretty much matches the 400, but you don't know. You could get a group of people in town who all say, let's do this, and so you get a very biased
Or
side.
let's not do this. Yeah,
Or,
that's-
yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was
same
I was
questions
think-
though, right? Same questions, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Same exact questions. The online, obviously, in some places has some pull down menus where when they call, some of those are a little more open ended, where they say, what do you think? And then, they have a list, but they don't give them that list.
Okay.
So it's a little bit different, but it's exactly the same questions. And we had purposely asked them to really make sure that they separated out the business people in town so that we could get some separate data on that. So that's why I was pleased that we had 70 there.
Yep, that's good. Thank you.
And I know Jeff had talked to the Chamber of Commerce to make sure that information got out there.
Thank you.
oh, Sylvia, you had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow that up, and I took the online survey. I was one of the 700 that did that, but I can't remember. There's no way that somebody can take it twice? Is there? Or what prevents me from going in and taking it again? Or taking it 10 times? Is there any?
I don't think anything does.
I don't think that there's any stop to that because you don't have to give any personal information
I wondered.
as you're doing it.
Okay.
I think we just have to assume there's honesty. And I think when you look at the data, for the 400 that are called versus the 700, as I said, they told us that the two generally match up pretty well. If you find that something is skewed really off, then you might ask some questions like that.
Okay.
And I think that's why we do the 400, because those are definitely 400 individual people, a statistically significant piece of it. The extra stuff is online, and yeah, it could be skewed based on who does it and who does it multiple times. Sure.
Yeah. And the 400, they said very specifically, they have, what percentage of the population is a certain age and things like that. And if, as they're doing the calls, they're not reaching people, they purposely make sure that they fill in the right people for that so that it ends up being a cross section of the town.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chuck,
To
go
that,
ahead. Oh.
Sylvia, I believe that they do IP tracking as well, so it'll limit any sort of like bot service from entering data or the same IP address, or somebody would have to do it from multiple IP addresses.
Oh, that's good.
That's good.
Chuck, you had a question?
Yeah, you said that 70 were business people. Like, what
Yes.
constitutes a business person? Is it like business owners, or how's the what's the line?
I don't recall exactly how the question is worded. Jeff, do you remember?
Yeah, so it's somebody that specifically says they either own a business in town or self-employed in town.
Got it. And
Yeah, it's
then,
one of the questions near the end. It asks if they're a business owner.
and then you just remind me, are there also business owners as part of the 400 calls, or no? Like, are they calling businesses or?
Well, we asked them to make sure that that was part of the information. Hopefully that will come out as a separate spiked piece, because we knew that that was an area of interest on the part of the committee.
Got it. Thank you.
Anyone have any other questions? I had one follow-up one. This afternoon, I actually posted it on the forum to just remind people to fill it out. Someone on there made a comment that every time they try to do it, it doesn't allow them to finish. And I don't know if there's like a timeout or something like that, where they're not doing it in the right amount of time. But I didn't know if you guys had heard, Rich or Jeff, if you had heard anything about that or knew if people were having trouble completing the form.
No,
Haven't heard anything. I did it myself. I know Sylvia just said she did it.
Yeah.
I had no problem.
Had no problem.
Will the platform give you stats on incompleted surveys?
I don't know. That's
I believe it will. It will tell us how long it takes each person to complete it.
Got it.
But if it's incomplete, would they let us know that, Jeff?
No, I think it's, as far as I'm aware, we do not get the survey if it's incomplete.
How many people are?
Not the survey, but are there any Google Analytics metrics that they use to say, hey, someone started but didn't finish? Just like, so if there's one or two, probably not a big deal if it's many. If it was many, though, I would assume we'd be hearing complaints, but
I'll ask specifically too.
More curious.
Yeah, if we could follow up on that too, because the person I was just looking here, it says they've tried twice to fill out the survey only to be kicked out before finishing. So if there's like a glitch or something, or I'm not sure what's happening, but just to ask them if there's something we can do to follow up with that.
I wonder if it's something to do with their internet connection or something.
Possibly, yeah.
I'll take care of that.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay.
Somebody from that IP address already have completed the survey too.
Maybe that's part of it. Okay, so Rich, do you have anything else to discuss? I know at one point there was some discussion about doing like a regular video thing that was going to be produced by possibly the Cheshire Cast folks, or
that was something that that Jim had brought up, and he was beginning to explore that, but we haven't gone any further with that. We just did the one video at this point, and I think we're still looking into that possibility.
Okay, Jim, do you have anything?
Yeah.
I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, well, just to say that it's still sort of in the works, so we haven't moved that forward just yet, but hopefully we'll soon.
Okay, sounds
And
good.
those were, anyway, yeah, that was going to be a series of short pieces, possibly using some other people from the committee.
Okay. Okay. Anything else in communications?
Nope, that's it.
Oh, Chuck, go ahead.
Well, back we had talked about getting like short videos of the conditions of the schools to kind of go along with some of this communication. Have we done anything with that or no?
Committee hasn't done anything with that at all.
Was that something Vin or Jeff was working on?
We don't have anything produced for videos of the buildings. I mean, are you looking for a tour-ish kind of video, or?
I know we had talked a while back, like,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't know the condition of some of the buildings, and, talking about it doesn't do it justice. First, we were
Right.
going to have a couple of short clips. I thought we were going to be kind of hosted either on the Facebook page or the town page of the conditions.
Yeah, I'll see if we can get on that with Mike.
We had the videos that we took when we were doing the tours back before COVID.
Right.
Maybe we can piece together some of that. And I know the tours that we did back in the fall weren't recorded, but I don't know if we can take some pictures or something or include it in some way.
I think they were all recorded.
They were all recorded.
The ones before COVID were, but we did school tours in the fall. The schools that we didn't hit before COVID happened, it was Darcy, Hummuston, Doolittle, Norton, I believe. The full committee didn't go on those tours with video recorders. It was just a couple of people.
Like, so when we did Hummuston.
Right.
Just
so
me, Chuck, and Jeff.
Those weren't recorded. Vin was there taking a couple pictures here and there, but we have half the schools that actually weren't recorded, so I don't know how we could incorporate those. Yeah. Anne, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just caution, be a little careful about what we put out there. I mean, our parents' kids are in these schools right now. And I don't know, I would not want to see like those classrooms that had water damage and all that stuff, because that stuff's been fixed, right? So before the kids came back into school and into classes, but maybe we can keep the videos concentrated on like the boiler rooms or, rusty pipes down underneath. I don't know.
Well, I think it's important to keep it real without, I mean, we don't have broken glass in the hallways. I mean, we have a safe situation. Absolutely, though, there are places that are unsightly or, maybe most people wouldn't say, oh, this is inviting. Like if you drove by Dodd today and saw 700 kids standing outside for a gas leak, you wouldn't, get warm and fuzzy. And I think we need to take stock of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's the reality. Like I said, we don't have dangerous situations. We do everything we can to make
Yeah.
it look as
If
good.
Well, I certainly trust your judgment.
Show the
but-
Yeah,
reality.
Jeff, use your best judgment.
Yeah, thanks. guys.
If we were going to do it, obviously you need to take 7 or 8 things in each building and do, maybe 10 seconds each. You only want it to be a, 2 to 3 minute video. People aren't going to watch, long videos on each of the schools.
Sylvia, did you
Yeah,
say one?
I just like to agree a little bit with Anne in the sense that our focus here is to develop one scenario and an option to present to the council for the first phase. And I think that if you're going to video anything to support our choices and the reason why we have chosen those particular buildings to be done first, whatever we end up doing, would be the place to say, this is why we chose these buildings. Here's the problem here, here's this problem. And that corroborates the reasoning that we use to get to the point where we made the decision. But if we start putting up stuff that's from a school that maybe is in the second or third phase, we're not discussing those right now. We're only discussing phase 1 and 2. Those are, the first phase, the 2 options that we're talking about. If you muddle that up with things that might be way down the line and we aren't even going to be presenting to the council, that I think possibly introduces somebody saying, I'm not going to vote for this scenario because I don't like it. My kid goes to this school and it's worse over here. We need to all be focused on whatever choice we make, whatever that is. And then let them know exactly why we did that choice. And it's because of this problem with whatever it is, whether it's, there's no good wiring for high-tech things, or the driveway is bad, or whatever the issues are in that school. I think that's the place that those videos can be helpful in the first initial presentation. And that's what the council's going to look at. So just my opinion.
I saw Don's hand earlier, and then we'll get to Tony.
Yeah, I was going to agree with what Sylvia said. I think our focus should be on whatever phase 1 of whatever scenario we choose, and maybe we should hold off until we choose that scenario on the video. But I mean, we can also we're not going to be focusing on anything unsafe. It's going to be lack of storage, not ADA compliant, things like that. That I mean, I think most parents will know already about the schools anyway. I don't think we should be focusing on any. I don't think we have anything unsafe. The schools are safe. It's just some of it's old and needs to be improved and redone. So I think waiting until we choose whatever scenario we're going to go with is the best way to go.
Okay, thank you. Tony, go ahead, and then Renee.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything except that, I would definitely skew the videos towards the first phase for sure, but I would definitely sprinkle in some of the things for a longer phase. Remember, there's a long-term facility master plan, not just phase 1. But I agree with Sylvia and Don. I'm sure it'll be fine. Jeff has plenty of areas to film for phase 1. So anyway, so good point. And yeah, maybe it is a good idea to focus on the 2 options, I guess, that we're looking at. And maybe once the options, whatever they are, go to the respective bodies, do more promotional videos and walkthroughs specific to that. But good points, Sylvia and Don. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Renee?
Yeah, I think, based on my own experience for when we toured all the schools, I think that when you look at the spaces, they're all well kept, they're all well maintained, they're all safe. So it is hard from just looking at the buildings themselves to say, oh, this really needs to be renovated. What I'm getting at, if a video is done, I think it needs to show what we have and then what it could be. Because otherwise, I think people will just say, well, this looks good to me, but they don't have a good frame of reference. We do, because we have toured many schools, we have had multiple conversations, etc. But without a frame of reference, I think it would be hard to make a determination whether what we're seeing is good or not, unless you start showing rusty pipes and all that, which I don't think is the purpose. So.
Okay. Anyone else have any other thoughts on that? Do we want to hold off on that for now? Maybe we can have Jeff follow up with maybe obtaining those videos, and based on how our discussions go with the options, we can put something together once we have a recommendation. So in the next couple of weeks or so.
My thought.
Okay, everyone good?
Our committee can work with Jeff on it, and
Okay.
as I said, it'd be a few short ones. Things like, obviously Chapman, no matter what we do right now, is going to be one of the schools we're looking closely at. It would make some sense to go in and do a short video, and that might be, maybe we could start there, do one, show it to the committee, and see if that's what they had in mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, definitely don't publish anything until we've all seen it. Okay, great. Next item is the discussion of Hummuston. So I put this on the agenda because we've had some discussions lately about what to do with Hummuston, whether it the Board of Ed or the high school piece get moved into leased space, or if the Board of Ed piece gets pushed into one of the newer schools that we're going to build. Jim Haggett actually sent us an email throughout sometime during the week mentioning that the Hummuston building is part of the state historic list, I guess it's called. Jim, if you want to kind of explain a little bit what you found.
Yeah, so it's on the, well, Jeff actually found this first, but it's on the State Register of Historic Places. I had been looking on the State Department of Economic and Community Development site for another reason, and I came across a grant program for buildings, for rehabbing or updating or improving buildings that are on the State Register of Historic Places. And so that it got me thinking about Hummuston and whether or not that was. And I had asked Jeff, and he checked, and it was. And I later checked the database, and it is indeed in there, along with another number of other buildings in Cheshire. But so it's there. There's a grant program. It's only, I mean, only in quotes. It's $5,000 to $100,000 worth of grant funds that we could apply for to do something with Hummuston. But I think the larger question I had in my mind too was, what exactly can we do with Hummuston down the line? If it can't, I don't think we can necessarily just shed the building, at least in the way I've been thinking that we can, because of its designation on that list, and because of the I think there's a deed restriction that indicates that it can only be used for educational purposes. And so I just, it seemed like maybe we need to have a larger discussion. Maybe you guys did before I was even on the committee, I don't know, but it seemed like we needed to have more of a discussion about what exactly we're doing with Hummuston before we kind of assume it's part of the first phase.
Okay. And in addition to that, we had started talking about leased spaces and the thoughts of where would that be? What piece of land or property or building could we use that would be a perfect fit? Would be really tough to find. So I saw Don's hand. We can go to you now, and then we'll kind of get back to whatever.
Yeah, just going to what Jim was saying about that. I believe Sean is looking into that, doing some proactive looking into what our rights are with that building and what we can and can't do with that building. Like Jim said, it's a $5,000 to $100,000 grant. I believe to bring it up to ADA compliant, somebody said it was like $5 million. So we're a far cry from $5 million on that. But I believe they're going to check in to see, can we sell it? Can we demolish it? What can we do? And I mean, that's going to be up to the town council in the long run, what we're going to do with the building if the BOE decides it's not going to use that building anymore. Mm-hmm. But I know that Sean is looking into what we can and can't do with that.
Okay, that's good to know.
That a little bit, if I can interrupt, because
sure.
Yeah, we did that the last time we had this modernization thing, the last go around, and I believe that the legal team said that there were the deed did restrict it to educational purposes, but they felt that it would require a court case, but if we might be able to change that deed restriction since it's been for such a long time. So I know it's been looked into once, and Sean, I think, is looking to revive that and see what the appetite is for that. Whether if we don't use the building and sell it to a developer for high-end condos, what can we do with that? And if we did, we probably couldn't get a lot of money because the cost to the developer to rehab it and bring it up to ADA compliance would be just as high for him as it is for us to do for the schools. So, you know, but I know Sean is looking into it. That's correct.
Okay. I saw another hand, Anne. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Anne.
I think in light of the information that that Jim had sent us last week, I would really be more comfortable not having Hummuston and the school and the Board of Ed offices. I would be more comfortable not having that as part of phase one, and certainly not, and I expressed this last meeting not very eloquently. I just would like not to be building new schools with however much space needed for Board of Ed offices. It just doesn't seem to be the right place to put that, to add it on to building a school. It's like putting added cost on a school building, and I'm not sure how well that's going to go over with the public. But those are my thoughts on it.
Okay. Go ahead, Vin.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. What I wanted to add, if the building is retained as a school and as central office, you know, I'm assuming it would be in addition to any historic grant, but just wanted to remind the committee that we would still be eligible for a school construction grant through, you know, the typical state construction grant process. So the funding would be above the, you know, the $100,000 grant if it stays as a school and central office. So that's something that I would put on the table, you know, for consideration as we look at other alternatives for Hummuston. You know, the other thing that I'll, you know, add while I have the floor is assuming that we are able to, and we would have to go to the Attorney General to change the restriction to use the building for educational purposes. You know, but if we do keep the building and use it for non-educational purposes, we still would have to deal with the ADA, you know, and any other compliance issues, as well as, you know, making some general upgrades to the building. So, you know, it is a complicated question, and it doesn't hurt us staying in that building right now. The bigger cost to Hummuston will be, you know, what improvements we make. And Don mentioned the $5 million. You know, that was the general estimate we had from Perkins Eastman to renovate the building and make it ADA compliant, not just the ADA compliance piece. So I just wanted to get that out.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Tony, is that a hand? Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. You know, so yeah, and Jim, thanks for that information. I honestly don't remember if the last study this even came up as a historic building. I think Sylvia's spot on with the legal analysis, but certainly the committee should have that documentation, you know, on the deed and what would have to happen there. So we're all fresh with that. I think, you know, from a Board of Ed consensus, we do want to address Hummuston at some point. It's certainly not the number one thing, but it is up there. So I recommend the committee continue looking to see if we can find an adequate space for the alternative high school and Board of Ed offices in phase one. We looked at this when we did a new 6th through middle school idea a few years ago. We looked at this when we did as an option when we looked at the Alexon building when it was available. So if the space makes sense and it fits, let's look into that. But in the interim, we know that no matter what happens in phase one, you know, there's gonna be a period of time that we're still gonna be in Hummuston, unless a better leasing option comes along. So if not, it might be worthwhile to look at these grants and do something with the building anyway, because as others said, you know, until we're able to shed that, there's gonna be a use for it. So we take advantage of the grants and it helps make that building more valuable and more useful. You know, we should look at that too. And you frankly, that's something the Board of Ed Planning Committee can look into and start, addressing that. But nonetheless, I'd like to keep all the options open. So for what it's worth, hopefully that little bit of information helps. So thank you.
Anyone else have any thoughts? Okay, so with this new information, I'd like to kind of get a feeling for how everyone's, feeling as far as keeping Hummuston in phase 1 versus moving it off to phase 2. And then also, if it is in phase 1, do we want to revisit keeping the building, keeping it with the Board of Ed offices as well as the alternative high school, and doing a reno on that building as part of phase 1 or even in the future. But specifically, since we're trying to figure out our options here, I'd kind of like to get a feel for how you guys feel about phase 1 versus phase 2 or 3, and then also a lease space versus trying to approach this from a reno of the building. Rich, go ahead.
I would be uncomfortable adding it into phase 1 as a reno. I think our costs are already fairly high with the programs that we have on the table at the moment. I do think that the building is very well situated. When we talked to the Alt Ed, you were with me, Jen, you remember the staff there was very, very positive about it being close to the high school and what it offered. I think the same is true with the district offices being right in the center of town near everything else. I'm not certain what we ought to do with the building. It's beautiful outside. It's got serious issues inside. But my recommendation would be to move it to a later phase and make a decision down the line after we have more information.
Okay. One concern and one of the reasons why we had it in phase 1 is because, if phase 1 gets approved and then phase 2 and 3 are not approved or voted on or, pass referendum, that means that we are not able then to do anything with that Hummuston building as part of our project. So it is a risk moving it off. I feel it's a building that needs some attention because of the ADA issues, the space issues, things like that. So are we comfortable with the fact that we could continue with phase 1, get it approved, move forward, and then if phase 2 fails at referendum or doesn't get approved by the town council, we are then, stuck with this building and we aren't able to do anything with it. We didn't make any progress on that building, I guess is the way. Andrew.
I would kind of agree with Rich on this, that I think that Hummuston could get moved out of phase 1 into phase 2. Depending on what happens with phase 1, we might be closing several buildings. And so there's going to be 2 buildings. Let's just say that if we go with the new elementary school option, we close Darcy School and we close Chapman School, I don't think we need to add Hummuston to the mix right away. If the study is showing $5 million worth of projects could be done to Hummuston to keep that open, even if phase 2 doesn't ever get approved, we could handle that through the planning committee and do the ADA compliance issues at Hummuston, where we could add the elevator, et cetera, that's needed to keep that building functional. I'd hate for phase 1 not to get off the ground over Hummuston School.
That's a good point. Okay. Jeff. You're muted.
There we go. Yeah, I would agree with both points. I think it's so critical for the success of our committee and this project that phase 1 happens, and that momentum should lead into phase 2 and 3 when people see, the real value and the risk of Hummuston derailing kind of stuff that I think is a higher priority. I would move it to phase 2. And to Andrew's point, as buildings free up, we might find a solution down the road that's better suited.
Okay. Anne.
I'm in full agreement with the last 3 comments.
Okay. I saw Sylvia and then Jim and then Don.
Yeah, and I concur with all of that. I think that the statement that you made, and I'm not sure you intended it to come out that way, but I heard was we wouldn't be able to do anything about Hummuston if we didn't do something about it then, and the second referendum didn't pass. I think with a $5 million price tag to redo it, even if it was a $6 million price tag, it might become a standalone issue, which could pass. I mean, we spend that money to fix roads and things, so that might be able to move in as a separate referendum item, even if the bigger ones would not. So I think given the population that is serving right now, I think it's critical that we not let that interfere with the larger issue that we have about the greater population of the elementary school. So I would say let's push it off.
Okay, thanks for the feedback. Oh. Who did I say next? I think it was Jim, right? And then Jim and then Don. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just think there's sort of too many question marks about Hummuston right now, and it seems to be functioning okay as a Board of Ed office and as the alternative high school and so forth. So it is, I think, a greater risk to leave it in phase one now than to then we don't get to it later. That's the greater risk is to leave it in phase one now. So let's push it off.
Okay. Don, where'd you go? You moved on my screen. There you are.
Okay. Then the $5 million whatever they said that was from 3 years ago. Did that include? Because I know in the 5-year capital budget plan, there's a $2 million roof replacement there. Is that part of that?
No, there's actually in the capital plan, Don, there's 2 million for ADA compliance.
Okay.
And then I think you're right, there's a $900,000 roof.
Okay.
project. So that would be all folded in.
So, okay.
You know, and the $5 million is, you know, it's a rough number, you know, from Perkins Eastman from 2017. So, you know, I just
The
put it
state
out
would,
there.
if the state, if we want to renovate that and we get the grants from the state, it would have to be renovated to new. It wouldn't be renovated. If we want to get the renovation rate, it would have to be renovated to new. So we can't just like fix the ADA issues. We're going to have to do major renovations on that building, not just fixing the problems of the ADA compliant. So I have a problem that I think, I don't want to speak for all the council, but I know a number of the people on the council really feel that Hummuston needs to be shuttered because of the amount of work that will need to be done on it. And I would hate to see it being pulled out of phase one. I think, you know, what Jen said was right. I mean, if phase two and phase three don't get approved, we're going to be facing some major bills on that building down the road, and that could cripple us a little bit because you know, I know the state is saying that when you renovate, it's renovate to new. So it's not going to be a $5 million reno on that. It's going to be a multi-million-dollar reno on that building just to bring it up to compliance.
Well, you know, if I may, if we do like code compliance improvements which would include ADA, you are eligible for the, you know, 45% reimbursement rate. And as an example, when we did the fire sprinklers, you know, at Hummuston, and it was about 10 years ago, that qualified for the reimbursement from the state. So it doesn't have to be a full-on renovate as new. Whether or not we should do that is certainly a question. You know, I think the thing about Hummuston is because it's a historic building, the Hummuston family still lives in town. I think it's not going to be just a simple matter of, you know, shuttering the building. I think there's a lot of considerations that, you know, need to be considered as to what to do with Hummuston next.
Okay. Jim, you saw your hand and then Tony.
I also wonder, with Hummuston being a historic building of sorts, I wonder how down the line how easy that would be to sell to a developer, given that there must be some restrictions on what they can do with the building. You know, I don't know if anyone has any further information about that or would be able to speak to that at all, but it seems like that's potentially a problem in, like I said, in kind of trying to shed that building later on too. But
It's in the historic, and not only is it a state registered historic business building, but it's within our Cheshire Historic District, which will limit whatever a builder might come in and do there too, because there's some pretty strict restrictions about that, I think, in that area. So yeah, I really believe that I stick with my original thing that we should not worry about it in the first phase.
And just to go back, I just wanted to comment real quick on one thing that Don said, as far as, you know, every step of the way, we're at risk of cost increasing. I mean, the first, we've been sort of talking as though the first referendum is going to pass.
Right.
There's certainly no guarantee. I mean, right now we've sort of, we probably, and we can talk about this more later about the two options, but I think we're probably being a little bit exuberant, overly exuberant as far as having basically two projects on both of the options of the first phase, never mind Hummuston as well. So, you know, at every step of the way, we're at risk of things going longer and things getting more costly. And that's just where we are right now.
Okay. Tony, your hand was up earlier.
Yeah, quickly. You know, I honestly, I wasn't even thinking about the cost implications in phase one. So I certainly agree with Rich and team about not addressing Hummuston as part of that phase one plan. And to Don, so, you know, what Vince is talking about code compliance issues, I relate those to what we had to do at the high school when the 2009 Office of Civil Rights Assessment came in and did a, you know, top down, bottom up assessment and walked through the high school, and we had a $3 million set of projects to do over what's been now 12 years. It's those kind of things. That wasn't a full rental. It might just be, if that, so there's two things. The reason I raise it is code compliance might be enough to get the building, you know, operating better, and we're addressing ADA. Second issue is at some point, you know, the state can show up and do another assessment of that building, any of our buildings, and raise code compliance concerns, and then we have to address them like they did for the high school. So while we don't have to address this in phase one, you know, I will ensure that the Board of Ed works on Hummuston as part of its capital planning process. So while phase one is going to referendum or what's happening there, we'll continue to push those code compliance projects as needed through capital planning. And if phase two doesn't happen or doesn't get voted by the voters, then at least we have something that we can plan and work for in normal course of operations to address that building. So I want to say all is lost in phase one, but you know, it will be on the Board of Ed to do what it always does every year and ensure its capital projects to address some of these things. So, but I will support not addressing Hummuston in phase one.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Matt, I saw your hand earlier.
Yeah, Vin touched on it. The prices are several years old. Before we could, I think I could certainly make an informed decision. I'd like to know what that's going to cost us today in today's numbers. And if we did go with a full reno, would the state even allow this? And what would be the taxpayer consequences when we know the proper number? What is this going to add to the burden of the taxpayers in phase one? You know, it's been discussed for many years as what can happen to this building, and when the Hummuston family gave the land to the town, what was it supposed to be? What was it going to be? Was it in perpetuity? It was supposed to be something to the effect that it had to be educational in nature. Well, you know, there's many ways of dealing with Hummuston. Sylvia hit it that it is an historic building, and it's in our historic district. Therefore, that anything that we do exteriorly would have to be approved by both the state and our local district. But you have, just to keep it, if it had to be maintained as educational, you've got St. Peter's, you've got Temple Beth David, and you've got Cheshire Academy, all within a few feet of this building that might have the wherewithal to take it over and make it part of their complex and keep it as educational. So there are many options to this, and you know, I think people should know that, and I don't think they should be in phase one at all. I think phase one, we still don't have the complete numbers for phase one and what the impact is going to be on the taxpayers. And you know, we've got to get this, forget the taxpayers, we've got to get this past the town council before it gets to the voters. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jim, was that your hand I saw earlier?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Vin or Tony, as far as the ADA, when the state comes in and they do the code compliance check or whatever you had referred to as, what happens then if they're like, okay, you guys need to do this? Do they give you sort of a calendar date of when the work needs to be done by, or you're then fined, or how does that work?
I'll answer that and Tony can chime in.
Okay.
So the state, they did an audit in 2009 of Cheshire High School, and we are in a voluntary compliance status until all the work is done. So we have to provide a report to the state every year, generally in July, and give them an update on where we are with all the remaining items, and that report, which I do share with the town council during the planning for the capital budget. So you'll be seeing that soon, Jim. The report shows all the items that have been completed and all the items that are still pending with dates that we expect to complete them by. So, we've been keeping the state updated. We explained to the state that, due to fiscal limitations, we've pushed some projects out. We went to bid. The last major phase at Cheshire High School actually went out to bid just about a month ago, and it's to make improvements so that the entries into the classrooms, which have a small vestibule and a door that limits, access for wheelchair in particular, that's all slated to be done this summer. It's money that's been appropriated by the council. We have the school construction grant approved. We will be getting a 45% reimbursement for that. So there is no consequence as long as you keep the state updated. And in Connecticut, as far as I know, there's never been a district that's been penalized by losing federal grant money. That could be a consequence, but it's not happened. So, we try and comply and keep the state up to date every year.
As long as it looks as though you're working toward the problem, then they're fine.
They've
More or
been
less.
fine so far. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Great.
Go ahead, Don.
Just a quick question. Are there any kids who are currently at the Hummuston or employees who have trouble using the steps or getting around at that school currently, or have in the past?
In the past we have, and it's true at Hummuston, it's true at any school. If there is a particular issue with a student that we can't resolve because the building isn't compliant, we will address it and solve the problem in whatever manner makes sense. But I don't think,
but then I think you hit it on the head. There are issues like that not only at Hummuston, but in other buildings as well.
Yep.
And when I look at this whole thing, and I think, firefighters don't go into a burning home and straighten the paintings out. They're fighting the fire first. And so the fire right now, the most urgent matter that we need to address, in my opinion, is the elementary enrollment. And so I have this vision in my head of trailers at schools, at people on carts, classrooms doubled up. That's what is staring us in the face. Hummuston is an issue. We know all the buildings have issues, but the most urgent matter, I think, in the face of this group is, what do we do about our space at the elementary schools in the relatively near future? And so, with all due respect, I think, the Hummuston situation is relevant, but it's nowhere near as important as addressing some of these other issues. Just my 2 cents there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands. So it sounds like everyone is in agreement that we are going to address Hummuston as part of the next phase of whatever scenario we end up picking. Arnett, I don't think we need a vote on this, do we? An actual vote?
Excuse me,
No? Okay.
I'm not in agreement with that.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
No,
Okay, well, thank you for voicing that. Is anyone else against this before we move forward? Don, I'm on your side as well a little bit. I do have some concerns about pushing it off, but based on things that people said, I do believe that there are ways to address them in the future. Okay. So I do agree completely that something needs to be done with Hummuston, and that was one of my passions, is making sure that it did get put into phase one.
Just because I think that when you're presenting this to the council is going to be questioning that, because they're going to be looking at a separate bill coming down the road, whether it's capital improvement down the road or something like that. And that's something that this committee should really be paying attention to as well. When we're passing down, we're going to be putting in a scenario with, whatever it is, and then adding something down the road to do that. So.
Right, and we are going to keep it in our project. It will be included in phase 2 or phase 3. So we're not planning on just handing that off. But if the phase 2 or phase 3 doesn't get approved, then obviously that would be something that we wouldn't have control over, and it would end up in the town's lap. Chuck, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, if including it in phase 1 saves long-term costs, then it would make sense to keep it in phase 1, in my opinion. I think we need to know what the difference is between the two. That if you take it out of phase 1, and we're gonna have X million dollars cost later on versus this many upfront, then it would make sense to me to keep it in phase 1 to save that cost, because you're going to address it at some point anyway. At some point, we have to address Hummuston. It's not going to stay the way it is now. So,
because that'll change the capital avoidance that Vin had given us too in both scenarios, and because we have capital avoidance in there, so that will change that whole scenario too.
Yeah, I would add to the bigger piece with Hummuston is I don't see the Board of Ed offices as a big problem. I think you could find office space if you did have to lease it and you didn't include it in a school. It's really what everybody sees as the long-term solution for the Hummuston alternate high school, because a lease space for that seems like it would be finding a unicorn. You're going to have to, if you have to have a gym or something to include in that, finding the perfect lease space that you're going to have to outfit, it's going to cost money anyway. So if we looked at what the alternate high school looks like in anybody's plan to just keep this out of phase 1, that's what I'd be interested in here.
Go ahead.
The only thing I would say is, if we end up going with scenario 2A, at the end of the process, we're going to have Dodd School sitting there. Pushing Hummuston off, if that's the scenario we end up with, you've got space there to move people out and to close down Hummuston. But I don't think it needs to be done while our first phase is in process.
Okay, that was part of the plan in 2A, was that the Dodd swing space would house Hummuston for a while and may possibly be its long-term plan or just a temporary plan, depending upon what got approved later on. So that is something that we discussed too. Matt, you had a question or comment?
How long would it take to get the correct numbers for the renovation of Hummuston?
I don't know.
Well, before we can decide on what we want to do, I think we're going to need some sort of numbers. And again, the numbers that we have are several years old. And, we've got to be able to, have the taxpayers agree that $5 million for 30 students is the right number. And I think the number is going to be much higher. And I think there's alternate ways of dealing with 30 students in the alternate high school rather than spend that kind of money.
Okay. So whatever we end up doing with Hummuston is going to cost money. As far as whether that's a leased space or a renovation or capital improvements, that is an amount of money, and I don't have those answers right now. And it didn't seem to me from everyone's discussions, except for Chuck, that the amount of money would have made a difference in their decision as far as putting it off to phase 2. It sounded like most people were mainly concerned with phase 1 being a bigger risk with Hummuston included in it, regardless of the amount of money that it was going to cost. So I don't know. That's kind of what I heard, but if anyone is in disagreement with that, please feel free to speak up. Given if we were to get the actual numbers, I'm trying really hard to kind of focus this, and given the actual numbers, if we were to get them in a week, would that change anyone's mind on what direction you wanted to go with this? Anne?
It wouldn't change my mind because I feel like we have various options with what to do with Hummuston that, and including it in phase one sort of cuts us off of options, especially if we're building into a school and building offices to house Board of Ed offices, then it limits us to other options of what might come up with doing. It doesn't make sense to me to do half of that building until we know what we're doing with all of it, with the both parts together at the same time. So for me, it doesn't matter. For me, we need a little bit more time to digest and decide, because there's not just one thing to do with Hummuston. There are options.
Okay, anyone else? Renee?
You know, I agree with what Jeff was saying earlier. I think we have a lot of issues at hand right now, and there are certainly options for Hummuston, as Ann said. So I think it would be better for the group to focus on the fire itself, as Jeff put it so eloquently, and follow that route. So it wouldn't change my mind.
Okay, thank you. Because that is one thing, is that it would take time and resources from people's work effort to come up with those numbers and do that analysis. So if we are trying to focus on the most urgent needs, I don't know if spending the time on doing that analysis is the right choice right now. Okay, anyone else have any other thoughts on this? Jim, go ahead, and then Andrew.
I mean, if we go with if the ultimate choice is the 6-day middle school, then the option of moving Hummuston into the DOT at some point is a big selling point for that as an option. But wouldn't that actually sort of happen at a later date, more like a phase 2, when Hummuston actually gets moved into DOT? So
well, as part of 2A, DOD will be empty by the end of 2A, the first phase of 2A. So we could move Hummuston in as soon as DOD is empty as part of that first phase of 2A. They could move in there as a temporary swing space while the other schools are being renovated. They could be there as well. And then down the line, we can decide that that's its permanent home. But that, again, is not really our decision if we can't fill the rest of that building with educational needs. So.
Right. Okay.
Andrew, I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, I just keep coming back to, I'm putting a lot of confidence in my loans enrollment study. And even since the past 3 meetings, there's yet another subdivision proposed in town. And there's another affordable housing development proposed in town. And the birth rates are 40 more births than was originally anticipated when the study was done. And so if our eye on the prize is to get a project in November on the ballot, we have to cure the enrollment issue. And then, in my opinion, then all of these other projects will fall into place afterwards. Once we show what we can do and that we're immediately addressing the needs, then we could keep building the momentum. And what we propose to the town council is going to be a recommendation that, as we all know, is going to organically change and morph over the years as administrations change, et cetera, across the town, and the town changes. So I'm all for waiting on Hummuston. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony.
Yeah, it's not going to change my thought process. I appreciate, again, the time and effort to do that analysis study. It's not our most important problem. It's one. But I was going to reiterate, again, I want sure this committee understands that if Hummuston is not addressed as part of phase 1 of any plan that comes out of this committee, and it's not addressed as phase 2, either because something changed or it got shot down a referendum, if it got to that point, the Board of Education is obligated to do something with that building if it's using it. So those code compliance, those projects will still have to be discussed and addressed, whether or not this committee is able to move anything forward. So not all is lost. And I agree with Ann, there are options. And, again, I'm not gonna put anything more on Vincent or Jeff's plate, but we'll talk about it. But, again, we'll find a way to look into the grant options that Jim raised earlier for us. And of course, when the town council is looking at our capital projects, like we always do, we'll talk about the future of Hummuston. So I don't want this committee feeling like if for some reason we can't address this immediately, nothing's going to happen. There's options. I don't want to be exuberantly confident, but I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to do a lot of things. And I agree. Let's focus on the immediate priorities of phase one. Show the town we can actually, get these things done, and we'll get more support for the rest of the buildings moving forward. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, Jen.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think we can move forward at this point. The decision of the collective group, with a few people disagreeing, is that we will push off Hummuston until later phases of the project. And we will just focus right now on the immediate needs, which is really the enrollment at the elementary level. So, okay, thank you guys all very much. We will still keep Hummuston in the plan, and then again, we will have to review this and discuss whether or not it's going to be a reno or a lease space. I mean, we'll get back to all this again, but for now it will be out of phase one. Okay, the next item is follow up on the enrollment versus the capacity concerns that were brought up in the last meeting. We did some analysis with MMI, and we have Chuck now here. Thanks for joining us. And would you be able to kind of explain what we went over this past week?
Sure. Sorry I'm late, everybody. Yeah, so I think just to kind of recap and Jen, Chuck, or whoever, just refresh, I think the request from the last meeting was, asking a couple different scenarios of how large either the new elementary school or a new Norton school on that site would be in different scenarios, I'll say. And so those questions got posed to Malone McBroom, and to look at those and what capacities, what size school they need. But just the fundamental, and when we got the report, we had issues with it from Colliers, because what's important to understand is that the state of Connecticut does not look at capacity and target capacities when looking at the size of schools and reimbursement. They purely look at enrollments. And we've kind of mentioned this in the past, but just to refresh, those two aren't necessarily a one-to-one ratio. They don't equate to each other. Sometimes they do, but most of the time in our experience, they don't. And Malone was just answering the question, and it is important looking at the capacities, but that's also part of programming of the building as well. So there's many factors that go into it. Bottom line is, we need to look at enrollment numbers. That's all the state's going to look at, which ultimately equates to, as you've seen in the space standard, how big of a school will that support in a reimbursement. There is not an equation for capacity saying so many kids equals X amount of square feet. I do not have that equation. I don't know where it exists. In the state of Connecticut doesn't use that unless they've changed just recently. I don't believe they use that either. So I did have a conversation with Malone, John, and I. We did talk with them and got on the same page, and they agree. But they were just trying to answer the question of what size capacity. And ideally, as you've heard them say, you would ideally have some capacity, maybe about 10% spare is ideal. So when you get those those bubbles that go through the grades and the sectors, you have some room for flexibility. A lot of times we see when you look at, and you have to go through the ed spec, when you look at the enrollment, and then you develop an ed spec, and which tells you how many homeroom classrooms there are. And that's what we're really, I think, talking about is homeroom classrooms. Many times we're seeing that the capacity or the number of homeroom seats many times exceeds what the enrollment is. It all depends on the program. It all depends on the ed spec. So long story short, we need to look at enrollment, not capacity when we're looking at these numbers. That's really the data we need. And where we're at now is back in October, we had the initial enrollment capacities. and we estimated the size of a new elementary school, the 700 person elementary school. And we've been assuming the existing schools would remain as they are, maybe a small addition, but really kind of unknown. Making really some assumptions and looking at renovation costs, if you will, of the existing schools. But now we're really at the point we need to do a deeper dive with these options, in our opinion. We started out with rough, and now we got to kind of refine it. We need to sharpen our pencil with what either both options or one option, and really have Malone and McBroom dive in. If you remember when we did the RFPs, we asked for samples, and they did those nice fancy maps, and we've seen them for the existing redistricting. They need to, in our opinion, they need to deep dive on these options so they can tell us what to propose, whether new elementary school, if it's a middle school, we know that's grade 6 to 8, and what the resulting reconfiguration enrollment numbers would be, whether it's K6 or K5, because that's going to educate us more accurately what size building those should be, and if they need additions, if they can remain the same size. So that's a long-winded answer. I apologize if
no, thank you.
If there's any questions on it, please ask. It's a little bit complicated. So Jeff,
So
I
this-
know you have your hand up. I don't know if Jeff had a question, so I think he's had it up for a while.
Which Jeff?
Jeff Solon.
Oh, you're
Actually,
muted. Jeff.
I had that up a while ago, and it doesn't show you that your hand is up, so I guess I just haven't put it down.
Oh,
Lower hand.
you,
Okay.
you had your digital hand
Okay.
up. I didn't see that.
No, I'm just doing the wave at this point, apparently.
I don't.
So,
How can you see that? I don't see that on my screen.
Little smiley hand, or if you have the participant list up, you can see it.
Oh,
I just want to make sure I know if Jeff had anything to say. So,
Okay.
yeah, Jen, I don't know if that answers the question. I mean, because the capacities are telling us, and if you remember, they're saying the target capacities, it adds 10%, and the state's not going to support building a building that's 10% more than, say, an enrollment. But again, the capacity and enrollment don't go hand in hand. They're not a
Right.
1-to-1 ratio.
So the reason this came up was because we started questioning how big the school would have to be to fit the peak enrollment that was projected by MMI, and whether or not our options 1A and 2A could support that number of students. So we were addressing it kind of in a backwards way, where we were saying, okay, how big are the schools? Can we fit the enrollment in those schools, or whatever it is we're proposing? But what Chuck has kind of helped us understand this week was that it's kind of backwards, where we're going to have to build a school that will fit the enrollment. It's not that we're going to build a school and then try to fit the enrollment into it. It's that the state's going to look at those enrollment numbers and support us in building a school that fits those numbers. And that's kind of the way we have to look at it. And just as a general information, we have also been, talking about Norton and whether or not we'd be able to build a Norton school big enough to be able to not have a new Chapman and not Chapman at all, being able to close and consolidate. So based on the peak enrollment numbers from MMI, if we were to have a pre-K through 6 scenario, in scenario 1A, pre-K through 6, our peak enrollment is 2,700 kids. It's 2,711 actually, as far as their data goes.
Right.
So if we were to build a Norton and still have Doolittle and Highland, those 2,700 kids would need to fit in 3 schools, which is about 900 kids. So even if you could fit 900 kids in Doolittle and 900 kids in Norton, you still need 900 kids in Highland and 900 in Doolittle. You would still need to build a school at Norton that supports 900 kids. So I don't think that's an option. In scenario 2A, our peak enrollment is 2328 for our peak enrollment over the next 8 to 10 years. So even that, roughly it's about
PK through 5, that is. Jen.
I'm sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
PK through 5, our enrollment is 2328. So even with that, and trying to cut back, not that it was an option or anything, but even that, trying to cut back to 3 schools, you're still having 3 schools that have 800 kids in them. And I don't think that's what anybody wants as part of this plan. Maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, if that's what we want, that's, we can certainly discuss it. But to try to consolidate down to 3 elementary schools in either one of the scenarios, no matter how you redistrict, if we have them spread evenly across all the schools, we either have 3 schools of 800 kids or 3 schools of 900 kids. And I don't think that's the goal. So Chuck, go ahead.
Well, we currently have a school, Highland, with 800 kids in it now, right? So it would just be 2 more elementary schools that are the same size.
No, I think they have more like 7 something. Jeff or Vin, how many kids does Highland have?
At the
Wait a
minute,
minute here. I
yeah, it's closer to 7 something right now.
think it's
but
like 7.
646 I have.
I'll pull it up right now, the exact number.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
But
no,
what is the space standard
761, I'm
for
sorry,
the
7,
school, and
yeah,
then the
761.
what's the enrollment for the school as far as a space standard for it? I thought it was closer to 800.
Yeah, that you would have to pull the Mylone and McBroom slide for.
Well, that would be capacity. That's what we're saying is different.
Yeah, so in Malone's numbers, what they had projected, it might be provided for 2021, and I'm sure it's changed. Their numbers, they had 746. And I'm sure that's fluctuated a bit with,
We've had a bit of an enrollment spike. It's 766 now.
there you go.
We've added a ton of kids at Highland this year.
Yeah.
Every time you turn around, it goes up.
Yeah, Chuck, what you were asking and what we were kind of touching upon what Jen was saying is the enrollment numbers with, are for pre-K to 6 is 2,711. You need so many square feet per child to house these children, whether it's a new school, existing additions to those, based upon the space center. And that's just the standard that we use. That's what the state has established. That's what we were really looking at there as a basis. And what we were also doing and going kind of what Chuck Neth was asking is if we took the square footage of Highland and backed the number in, did a reverse calculation, said, okay, it's 106,000 square feet is Highland. And so backing in the number and reverse engineering or reverse calculating equates to about 814 student enrollment. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean capacity. It just from an enrollment perspective, if it stayed as is, theoretically around 814 students, according to the state.
Okay, thank you. Anne?
Yeah, what you're saying makes a lot of sense, Jen. And also it would, if we went down to 3 elementary schools, it would absolutely also prohibit us from moving Darcy into Highland, which is
we would balance that out. So Darcy would move into Highland, and those redistricting lines would have to shift in order to be able to fit that. And other kids would possibly have to go other way. I mean, if we have to cut back to 3 schools, we'll be redistricting anyway. But the Highland kids, the Darcy kids would move into Highland, and everything would balance out based on the new redistricting.
But are they part of that 800 or 900 number?
Yes, I'm
Pre-K
counting
to 6,
pre-K to 6, it's 2711, and pre-K to 5, it's 2328.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem.
That's an assumption of in the numbers was 105 pre-K enrollment is the numbers we have. And John, what was the number on the space standard for roughly 900 students, 120,000 square feet roughly?
Correct. Yes.
So you're talking a real, for 900, it's a pretty good sized school, especially in the state of Connecticut, unless you're down maybe in, I think, Norwalk, Stamford, some of the bigger cities, you're probably not going to see them in probably your comparable school districts, your DERG there, probably not going to see that big.
Okay, Rich, go ahead.
I was going to say, as an ex-elementary principal, I don't recommend designing and building elementary schools of 900 students. My kids went to Highland and it was a wonderful experience. But I think that most elementary schools, for good reason, tend to be around 500 students. I would much rather see us, if we're going, depending on which way we're going, to stick with the two solutions that are in front of us, either a larger elementary school in the north end, which will require some redistricting, but not nearly as much as if you closed the school and built a new big school on the Norton property, or a new 6-8 middle school, which requires no major redistricting, which I think would make it much easier to sell a referendum. I think that down the line, as we get into later phases, depending on what happens with enrollment, we can always take a look at whether we want to renovate Norton School or build a new Norton School, possibly even a little bit larger, now that we know that that property can potentially accommodate it. But we would still need 4 elementary schools.
Yeah, and talking with Mike Zuba, some of the other factors that we haven't talked about, and I think this is again why we need to get them reincorporated more strongly in the process here, because they have their area expertise. Is he's saying, hey, you're looking at how many sectors per grade. He says for if you're at a 900, you're probably looking at about 6 sectors per grade, according to their calculation. The other concern he had, and we were just in conversation, was number of lunch waves. Depending on how big that cafeteria is and your serving lines. We have some schools that are in 6 lunch waves that start at 9:30 in the morning. They go till, I think, and this is in South Windsor, they have almost a lunch wave per grade, depending on that factor. So these are just some of the other, I'm just sharing these, factors that we had in conversation. Traffic too, you're looking at a larger school, more traffic, depending on where it's at. So I think that, again, this deeper dive is I think we've got as far as we can go, at least with these 2 scenarios, to give us a rough idea of, hey, some of the costs centers. But really at this point, again, I'm saying sharpen the pencil and do a deeper dive, with Malone.
Thank you. Don?
Yeah, one of the questions we had last week also was, I think the new Chapman in scenario 2 was going to be a 300 student, 400 student. And was that going to be enough if you pulled out all the 6th graders out of all the elementary? And if not, can we build a bigger one on that same property, or would we have to build elsewhere? Because I think there was confusion as to how many 6th graders would be pulled. I think it was 220 is what we ended up saying currently, but we don't know what's it going to be in 5 or 10 years, how many 6th graders would be pulled out, and how big will that Chapman have to be in order to handle the overload.
Well, Don, I think that's exactly why we're recommending what we're recommending is having Malone do the deeper dive to give you an accurate answer to that question, because we can speculate all day, but I think there's some other and throw numbers around, but I think that might be a bit irresponsible, and not having Malone do what they do best and is doing those redistricting efforts, so you can see it graphically, not only on the map, but also having a thoughtful process as to how many would be in Chapman, how many would be at Highland, in the resulting schools, and what would that picture look like? We can do it at a high level, but the level of accuracy they're going to provide, I think I know it's going to be better than what if we just keep speculating based upon what our data that we have.
Because I have a concern about this now, because now that we're going to be delving into these numbers deeper, and we find out that Chapman that we had proposed in scenario 2 may not be big enough, that's going to throw off all the numbers. Plus, we're pulling out, we're going to pull out the BOE offices that were going to be part of scenario 2. That changes the numbers as well. And then we have the capital avoidance that we had in there that we had to pull out. So all these numbers are going to be changing once we get all these numbers right. So, I mean, we're a ways away from having some kind of solution or idea of what we want to pass on. I mean, I can't foresee that we're going to be ready in a month to present to the town council.
Yeah, no, I think your point, Don, is spot on in that. I guess the question is, if we didn't do this, right, and it changes later, right, there's homework that needs to be done. And what my recommendation and having in our working groups is the town council is you're going to ask these questions. And if we don't do this exercise, we're not going to have that answer for you.
Right.
Exactly. We have to have it right. We have to get it right. no matter what, we have to get it right. So if it takes us longer, it takes us longer, but let's get it right and not try to rush it to get it done. Because I just want to make sure, I mean, we all want something to happen here. And you know, believe me, I know I question things and I say, you know, but that doesn't mean I don't feel we need it. I know we need this. And I want to make sure that whatever we pass along to the town council is going to be passed by the town council so it can go to referendum so the citizens of our town can vote on it and hopefully approve whatever we come up with.
It needs to be defendable as well. We need to be able to justify the numbers in doing that exercise. And you're right, these things are going to move. I mean, we've done the high low and we've given our numbers, the cash flows to Jim to kind of give us an idea, right? And these things they just need further refinement. And I think doing that effort now is, we talked to Malone, they said roughly 2 weeks to do the effort, you know, on these is the turnaround we got. So if we were able to get those numbers, of course, we got to look at those and see what those look like. And it's not like after the 2 weeks, they would pass the numbers to us and we revise them. We obviously you need to look at them and go, okay, do these numbers make sense? Do the sizes make sense? As well as other factors. But once we have the proposed enrollment, that helps us, at least from the budgeting aspect, really drill down on a tighter budget for these schools. Set aside the site work that we've talked about in the past for like a new, but for the building proper, it will help us certainly drill down a little bit tighter than saying, okay, an estimated value either way in those.
Okay, thank you.
I saw Chuck and then Jim. Go ahead.
So Chuck, the more detailed enrollment that you're looking to do with my loan, we're going to need that anyway to go to the grant. Is that right? Is that like the deeper dive on the enrollments? Got to be done either way. It's just a matter of doing it now so we know what the scenarios are a little bit more
That's
detailed.
100% correct, Chuck. In order for us to submit I'll say a valid application, a complete application, because we're going to talk with the state, right? We were supposed to talk with them last week. We're rescheduling that. There's going to be one more round of conversations after that, and they're going to want to see this effort done. They're going to want to see, okay, what's the residual effect of building a new elementary school, building a new elementary or middle school, and what does the rest of that redistricting look like? Those who are in the meeting, Michelle Dixon, she's going to want to see that and go, what do those look like? So yes, we're going to have to do that to submit a grant application and for it to be considered by the state based upon our experience.
Okay, thank you. Jim, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, on the enrollment sort of projections that we're looking at, you know, so we have an idea of what they're going to be at the end of the decade. Presumably, those projections would continue in somewhat of an upward trend from there. I would think. Are we able to build in some sort of additional space for that kind of farther out projection, or a margin that, you know, that the current projections we have are a little bit low, perhaps, based on kind of everything we're seeing in the community right now? Does the state allow us to sort of build in something a little larger based on those numbers, kind of looking out a little further, or is it just what's happening over the next decade and that's it?
Yeah, Jim, that's a great question. That comes up all the time. So for whatever the first project would be, say if you submitted this June, they would take they would only reimburse, and this is a reimbursement function of from fall of 2021, and that being year one, and 8 years, another 7 years past that, and that maximum, whatever the projection for that school is your 8-year max for that specific school. Okay, and say if you just do one, we give them a plan. We would give them a plan for the entire plan, and that's what they like seeing. They like seeing the plan. So that would be capped there. They're not going to allow you to project out 10 years and say, we're going to add another, say 10%. We're going to add another 2 or 3 classrooms to it, unless, say, in fall of 2021 or even fall of 2022, if we saw a significant spike and we said, hey, the enrollments in this new school are going to bump up significantly and we're the middle of design, we'd have to go back to them. We did it in South Windsor with Dr. Carter at Eli, Philip, I see it was Eli Terry. We added 2 additional classroom in the middle of construction. We had the designer, because of the updates that Malone did, there was significant concern that they're going to run out. And so we met with them. They were fully aware of what the trends were. They would be here too. So the key is continuing to update those. But as far as projecting out beyond 8 years at the grant, typically it's no. But that doesn't mean you can't revisit it if there's a significant, difference in the trend. But the subsequent schools, for example, say phase 2, you're not applying for phase 2. So you're giving them to them, but we're going to update those. And if those go up, they'll accept those higher values for, say, a phase 2. Say if you did Doolittle and Norton, for example, and you say, hey, we want to renovate these. And if the numbers went up, that's from when we submit the grant application the following fall in those 8 years. It's not this year's study. It's a forever evolving process and updating. And when you do that, they give it value.
Okay, good. I mean, so to the group, that to me also speaks to the middle school project probably gives us a lot more flexibility going forward, right? If we do the middle school now based on what our projections are, then we'll have new projections later on when we go to renovate the other schools, and we'll have a better sense of what the real enrollments are going to be then. Just a thought.
Thanks, Jim. I saw Sylvia's hand, but she's not there. So the other one I saw was Tony.
Thanks. So I just remind the group that in between the town council looking at detailed numbers and a grant being written, the Board of Ed in Cheshire Public Schools has to work with this data in a number of ways. One is educational specs. 2, and probably the most important thing is we will be, as a board, inundated with parental requests, questions on what these options mean for the kids, what the additional schools mean for the kids, redistricting. And I'm not going to put the board in a position to say, I don't know the answer to those questions. It's the worst thing we can do. So this study will help the board. It's going to help Dr. Stone, obviously, because he's going to be responsible for his specs. So this will be used. And I can tell you that, the poll of the board members, we're hoping to get this data. If we didn't get it as part of the option submission, we'll come back and ask for it. So it's well worth it. I think we should get the 2 weeks, invest into this and get it done. It's going to pay off dividends down the road for us. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any comments? Okay. I think we, in this meeting, eventually have to determine what the 2 options are that we want to present to the town and focus on those 2 to do that refinement. I don't think we can have the refinement done, the redistricting done, those maps. I don't think we can do that if we have so many questions about what the options actually consist of. So the questions about, building a new Norton versus a new Chapman, where the school's going to go, whatever it is the issue is, I think we need to have those ironed out and have, 2 solid plans that we can then refine and do that deeper dive and have Malone do those mappings of the redistricting and then figure out which one of those that we prefer better. I think if we go into this refinement with still questions unanswered, it's just going to cause more confusion. I see Sylvia's back. Did you have a question or comment earlier? You're muted. You're still muted. Oh, there you go.
Dogs that had to go out. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I missed the last 5 minutes maybe of the conversation, but I know that, and this may be repetitive, but when we bring this to the council, that council is going to want definitive answers on the questions, and they don't want things that are sort of wavering about what's going to happen. So I agree with Chuck that it needs to be fine-tuned a little bit more, and I'm sure that's what you were all talking about, but I believe we definitely need to move ahead to do that before we present it to the council. It won't go anywhere, I promise.
Okay. So that kind of, we were on option or agenda item number 3, and it kind of morphed into number 4. Is there anything else, Chuck Warrington, that you wanted to discuss as part of, where we are with the current status and your recommended next steps? I think we kind of covered most of your items, but is there anything else?
No, I think so. Unless there's any other questions, Jen, I apologize because I was late. I don't know if there's anything that was discussed before that. No, just in general, it's like anything else. I think we've taken with the data we have. I think we've taken it about as far as we can go without taking this next step. Otherwise, I don't see us moving forward. I think we're just going to keep staying in the same spot, moving left to right versus moving forward, and kind of the way I visualize it, and take the next step. And hey, if the results of those are such that your committee says, okay, this wasn't what we're imagining, or maybe or expecting, we could take it from there. But at least there's something to react to, and more definitive than Kyers or us moving numbers around. Let the expert in Malone do what they do best and give us that data, and then we can. I'm always a fan of let's give them something to react to instead of, well, we're still thinking about it, and go back and do more work. So.
Okay. One follow-up question I actually had. You had mentioned the state meeting on Monday, this past Monday, had been rescheduled. Do we have a new date for it already?
Don't think so, John. We reached out to Angela Gelino. They're working on a date, and as soon as we find out, I think the question, if we're going to proceed with this and have Malone do this effort, the question I would pose is, do we let them do their homework so we can go to the state and use their time valuably and let them do that work and go, hey, we're doing a deeper dive. Let's wait till that's done and then go to them. Then we can get more constructive criticism from the state.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I think that makes sense. That was a question. I don't know if that was a question or not, but
yeah, suggestion, question.
I think that's, we're looking to you for your recommendation on how to proceed with this, especially the state.
Yeah.
So I'm in agreement with whatever you're guiding us to.
Yeah, if we're going to do it in a couple of weeks, I would definitely wait. Use their time. Their time is very valuable. As you can see, they had to push it back for other stresses, and the more concise and direct and clear we could be with them, the better results we're going to get back from them in response.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Okay, so that's it for those 2 items, I believe. The next thing on the agenda is our discussion on next steps. So I think at this point we kind of need to review where we are and decide what we're going to do to move forward. And for that, I'm going to let Chuck lead that one.
Thanks. So I guess turn it to Chuck. I mean, what do you need from us as far as how do we need to refine these? Like, what do you need for information from us for the best bang for our buck from my loan as far as these enrollments? I mean, are the scenarios in a good enough shape right now, or what do we need to do to them?
And I'll ask John Copus-Sopine. He got some correspondence from Mike, but I think where we're at now, we're in a good spot. What we'll do is we'll just I suggest we keep them as they are right now, and I think someone mentioned that. Like, let's keep that as the baseline, and let them dive in based on what we have, and then see what they come back with, and react to that, because we might be surprised in what we see, and whether good or bad. We might say, hey, wait a minute, we didn't really think about that effect, and it might change some things. So let's have them do the 2 scenarios as we currently have them, kind of set that for now. I think, John, they said in their current balance in their contract, I think they said they have about 2,500 left or so.
Actually, just about $3,000, Chuck.
And what was it? What did they give us for a value person? And we got to look at I want to look at their contract again too, and
right,
just confirm. But
I believe Mike had indicated it'd be about $3,000 for each of those scenarios to be run over that time frame. So,
and that would include some tweaks and some modifications and massaging of those, because it's a little bit of a back and forth with, okay, here's the line. They'll want to meet with Jeff's transportation director for, buses, and, they have them look at, where are the best routes, because they know the best,
Got it.
how it's situated.
John, was that 3,000 per scenario or 3,000 total?
They have $3,000 left on their PO, according to Mike, and I believe, I'm just gonna double check that email now, but I believe it was $3,000 per scenario, Jen.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we would need probably an authorization of additional it sounds like about 3,000. We'll just reconfirm it. I asked him for, an updated proposal just so we'd have it, but we don't have it yet. But we'd want to get, we would need authorization from Malone to proceed with that, Chuck, to answer your question.
Got it.
And then they would do their thing to be meeting with the Board of Ed folks, for what they need to do.
Got it. So question, Arnett, do we need to have a vote of some sort to authorize the additional cost to my loan?
Probably wouldn't be a bad idea.
So you
Got
need a motion to.
And that, yes, would be the answer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, that is correct, Sylvia. We would need a motion.
Should you authorize up to a certain amount in case it is more than that, like up to 5,000 maybe, just in case?
I would think that seems the right way to do it.
Yeah.
Can I ask how much do we have left in that budget?
So we
I'm
just
glad
said
you
that
asked
we
that
have about,
question.
yeah, I think we had 3,000 is what John was saying. Is that right? Or no, or not?
No, how much do we have left in our?
Out of the 150?
Yeah.
I am not at work. I apologize. I don't have that number at hand, but I can look it up and get it to you.
Do we have 5,000 maybe?
$5,000 left.
It's probably close to that.
Okay.
Well, we don't
don't
want to take a vote and authorize more money than what we have.
You can take a vote to authorize additional expenditures up to and not to exceed your total of 150,000. And then we can figure out the amount tomorrow and I could get that to you if you want to take action tonight.
Thank you.
I feel like we should take action tonight so we can kind of get this going, in my opinion.
I agree.
But it still needs a motion.
Motion that we authorize Mylone and McBroom, or is it a different name now? Mylone and McBroom, to proceed with the vetting of the two options that we have, and giving us further information up to an amount not to exceed the balance in our, what do we call it, our account that we have, not to exceed the 150,000
Appropriation.
that was appropriation.
I second that.
Nicely done, Sylvia.
All right, all in favor?
How about some?
Say what,
You want a
Matt?
discussion?
Yeah.
Well, I think there should be some discussion, because if we're going up to and including the amount that we have nothing for a contingency. If we go over or need to spend any additional money, we're going to have to go back to the town council for more money. If we've got approximately 3,000 there and they want 3,000 per scenario, I might authorize them up to $4,000, but I would leave a little something for you. You know what? I don't.
Okay.
So if you spend $1 more, you're going back to the town council. I don't think that's a good scenario.
But you agree that we need to bring this, authorize them to do the work. Is that what you're saying? We just want to be careful how we phrase the dollar amount to be authorized. Is that where we are?
I have no problem with them doing the work.
John's raising his hand. He might have the exact number.
Okay.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify. I did find the email, and Mike does state in the email that our remaining budget would allow us to evolve the current scenarios for 1A and 2A. So that 3,000 would cover both scenarios. However, he does state, should you need to do any adjustments and rerun projections, he suggests, just to play it safe, that the town could budget an additional $3,000 to cover any additional scenario reviews.
All right.
So
modify the proposed motion, right, to authorize an additional $3,000 to be up to an additional.
I withdraw your second and withdraw your first motion and then put another one on the table.
I withdraw my second.
Okay, so I will withdraw the first one and make this authorize $3,000, not to exceed $3,000 for the changes and the new information we need to get from Mylone and McBroom.
And now I will second that.
Okay.
Now, do I ask for more discussion? Is everybody good?
That's a good point, Matt. That was.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Unanimously passes.
Yeah, Chuck and Jen, just as a matter of reference, so I was just looking, I'm not sure other expenses that have come out of your appropriation. Our current contract's roughly 84,000 and change. And then Malone's original appropriation, basic scope of services was 9,720. And they had an alternate scenario, but I threw in 25,000. So pending anything outside of ours, we're around 110,000 based upon my estimate, but I don't know what other expenses you guys have.
The survey. came out.
Survey, yep, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Noted. So it seems like we have that in there. Arnett, you'll confirm, correct?
I will confirm. I will get you an update on the account by next week, so you'll have the exact numbers.
Good.
Very good.
Okay, so Chuck, so just to clarify, so we can get Malone and McBroom going on the two scenarios.
Yes.
We'll confirm it in writing. We'll send you our emails just so everybody's on the same page.
Can we confirm what those scenarios are? Because we took out Hummuston, just want to, and even last week we talked about switching scenario 1A, the two phases, the phase 2 and phase 3. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page as to what we're doing.
Yeah. So go ahead. You want to pull up the John or?
Yeah, I mean, I
pull
think
it
the
up, or-
phasing of it, if I can just summarize, I think so. In the first scenario, it's really there's a new K-6 elementary school, exact size, TBD. We're going to take the pre-K to 6. We're going to close Darcy and keep, and then look at the scenarios of a new pre-K to 6, Doolittle, Norton, and Highland. And I believe our scenario, if I remember that one, John, in that scenario. So in that scenario, really, it's an elementary school function. I mean, because your data's remained the same for 7, 8, and that's got capacity in the high school. So they don't necessarily have to look at that because all the kids go through those schools. So it's really just those elementary schools. And then in the 2A.
Before we move on, so in 1A, it's the building a new K through 6 school somewhere in the north end, closing Chapman. But that's the phase 1 piece, and also moving the Darcy kids into Highland. We also talked about possibly doing CIP to Highland in order to accommodate and prepare for those students to move over. And then we also discussed changing phase 2 to be the high school and then having phase 3 be the remaining elementary schools. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page and we all understand exactly what it is we're asking Malone and McBroom to do and in what order.
But Jen,
Chuck, I think what you're saying though is that it doesn't really matter
irrelevant
the
of
high
phasing.
school because we're just talking about K through 6 enrollment, right?
Yeah,
Like
correct.
the
What
high
they're
school and
gonna
the
be
middle
looking
school
at
stays the same, so it doesn't matter what phase they go into. To my
Yeah,
loan,
whenever the high school happens, the redistrict, when we say redistrict, we're really talking the elementary school levels because there's multiple schools within those levels. Middle school, high school, all the
Right.
kids go through it, right? Either way. So the actual, when those occur, Malone won't be necessarily, they'll look at it slowly, but it really falls with us and with you guys when those occur. We just need to know how many kids are going where, what the sequencing is. That could be a step 2 of their effort. We just need clarity on how many kids are going in what school. And then when they go there, that'd be part 2. So most of their efforts aren't going to be associated with the timeline per se.
Okay, so from Malone's perspective, that doesn't matter. I understand that. But if we're doing a deeper dive on this and we want hard numbers that we're going to present to the town council and board of ed, I feel like this is the time where we need to be shoring that up and making sure that we're all solid on this plan. So from Malone and McBroom's perspective, I understand that they don't need that extra detail, but I think for all of us to have a solid plan, we need to make sure we all understand what that plan is.
Yeah, for subsequent to that, when they give us the numbers, we can modify according to what phasing you want.
Hey, Jen, didn't we also discuss doing a full reno of Dodd in phase 1 of this?
We did.
So shouldn't that be part of that as well?
Yes.
That was technically the phase one alternate that was discussed last week. Don?
Right, yes.
Yeah.
Have we done that yet, John? Have we worked on that one yet? I think we
Yes, I
started to.
have. Let me just find that one for us here.
We have a lot of files, so forgive us, sir.
That's this one here, where the new K to 6 elementary.
And Reno Dodd. Yep.
Dodd. And then in this scenario, the phase 2 was the high school, and then Norton and Doolittle were bumped down to the phase 3.
Okay, so sorry, I heard someone else talking, but I can't see everybody. I apologize. So which one of these scenarios do we want to proceed with? I think we all agreed that we wanted Dodd in phase 1, and we wanted to switch the order of phase 2 and phase 3. So is this the plan that we all, hang on, let me try to see everybody. Is this the plan that we want to move forward with and do this deep dive analysis on, with the numbers and the budgets and the redistricting and the mapping and all of that?
Well, I think again, on the redistricting and the mapping, it affects K through 6. So
Right.
I'm not sure why we have to jump into which phasing and order we want to do it now, because we're going to see that information before we come back. No.
I want to make sure that we're making the best use of our time. And if we're going to spend 2 weeks waiting for Malone and McBroom to do their analysis on the redistricting, that we are also matching, and doing work on our side as well, or on Collier's side, to make sure that we have these numbers set for Jim, and then we can come back and at that point have everything that we need to make a decision.
What are we doing without the enrollment numbers, though?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
What are we doing in the next 2 weeks without the enrollment numbers? Like, what are you envisioning? What's going on?
Well, planning. If we're renovating Dodd, we can have budget numbers for that. The timing as far as the rest of the elementary schools and when they're going to be renovated, just making sure that all that budget is lined up and correct. And taking out Hummuston as well, because that's a new development tonight.
Yeah, as far as ours, Jane, just to kind of clarify, so for the most part, we have Dodd renovations, we have budgets on those. We've worked those up, and and to tweak those, I think John's already taken care of it, and we just modify the escalation costs, that we bring it up. With respect to the elementary schools, and those size, we'll really have to wait for Malone to finish it, and for us, for your committee to endorse those, so we can do a hard calculation on the space standard, get the size of the school, and then also for the others, are we going to require any additions for those? For the most part, we'll be in a bit of a hold pattern. Not we can do some work, but really going to be waiting on Malone to finish their work.
Okay, so that piece of possibly additions based on Malone's numbers is the piece that I wasn't thinking about. So thank you.
Yeah, we really need that. Usually in this process, we've had their numbers before, but we're kind of doing a little bit of both. We're doing this estimate and kind of giving an idea. Now we're refining it. A lot of times we come in and they already have these numbers done. Okay. So it's a little bit simpler process.
And also, just to clarify, that last version I showed, the 1A alternate, as I called it, that was factoring in the Board of Education addition to the new K to 6 schools. So, based on the discussion earlier tonight, I can back that out and tweak those numbers.
That's easy to move that out, yeah.
And back to Don's point too, is there capital avoidance costs that need to be removed now because of Hummuston?
Yes, there would be some modifications now to that part of it as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and Jen, just to kind of opine on Hummuston a little bit, because of the age, if you're looking at, say, renovation, I was thinking about it as you guys were talking, and just because of the age of it, and so forth, I would certainly, I'd be hesitant to do a range on that one, only because of the age, potential hazmat type materials, PCBs, et cetera. But also just having I would recommend having an engineer look at it structurally as well, just because of the age of the building and going through that and doing really a solid facilities condition assessment. If one hasn't been done, we can look at we could go back and look at Perkins Eastman and see what they have, and maybe that might be sufficient. But just wanted to throw that out there for,
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Chuck, in terms of the enrollment stuff though, for my loan, for scenario 1A and 2A, we're set. And I guess we talked about it briefly, but I don't know if there's a conclusion. The Norton option of the K through 5, not looking at that as an option any longer. Is that right?
Yes.
I think that was discussion of going down to 3 elementary schools.
Yeah, that's what I'm
that's
saying.
what you're
I
asking.
guess I didn't know if there was a conclusion to that. There wasn't a whole lot of conversation, or we just focused on the 1A scenario, the original K through 6 replacing the Chapman School, and then the K through 5 and 6 through 8 middle school again on the replacing the Chapman School, and not looking at the Norton option. Is everybody in agreement with that? Anybody disagree?
No.
Good. So we got that. All right. Is there anything else you need from us, Chuck?
No, I think we're good, Chuck. I appreciate the committee, giving the direction, and we'll reach out to Malone to get that ball rolling on these and follow up with both of you to keep you in touch on the status and timelines, for that.
Very good. So I think that covers item number 6 and 7. Jen, did you want to talk about timing for number
Kate
7?
O'Donnell raising her hand.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kate. My bad.
Okay. I know I've asked about the land, but I just wanted to clarify. So if we don't have any land in mind, we don't know where we're going, does that mean we're going to the town council with our presentations for both scenarios with no land? We're not discussing it. It's just going to be an open question for the town council and the board. Is that correct?
A good question. I think the assumption right now is that it is town-owned land. So there is not a line item for cost in there, but there is not we're not presenting a plan of a school drawn on a property, I guess is my understanding of it. And that's open for committee discussion, as I see Matt's hand, and Don. Go ahead, Matt.
I said this before, even if it's a town-owned piece of property, the public has to know where you're going to build that school. So I feel that before we go to the town council, we have to know where this school's going, if it's a town-owned piece of property. And I will never vote to forward anything to the town council that is not complete and does not have a complete analysis of the impact to our taxpayers. And if we're, wherever you put it, Chuck has said many times that they have to go in and do a soil analysis and a plot analysis and know what we're doing and what we're up against. And we would be incomplete again. So if you think you're going to use a town piece of property, I don't know of one other than Cheshire Park in the north end that was not going to go in some way back to the voters to take it out of open space. So, good luck.
You're wishing yourself luck, because this is a committee decision. So go ahead, Don.
Well, I think Sean did give us a list of properties at one point, I think, that were available and what weren't available. And possibly maybe Chuck could take a look at that list and see potential use of those properties. And then we'll need to talk to the town, whether it's Sean or somebody, to find out, if there are any restrictions on that property. And if there are restrictions, then obviously we can't do it. Even Cheshire Park, I think, was some restrictions as well. So I think we're going to have to, I do know the council would like to know where you want to build the school if you're going to build a school. So whether it's a middle school or an elementary school, I think they're going to want to know. I mean, I know we do have some property in some places that might do it, but if not, then we have to add into the budget. I think what Rob said at one point, a set amount of money to purchase property as well, which could be $3 million or whatever it is. That would have to be part of the budget as well.
Yeah, Don, we do have that list, and we actually did start looking at a high level at the different parcels, and I have a spreadsheet that I started kind of jotting down some notes, just looking at topography. There's some parcels along the west side of Cheshire next to Prospect that, there's the mountain there and it's really steep. I think, Chuck, where you reside over there, a couple, town-owned parcels that, just looking at geometry, looking at access to roads, frontage, just from a high level. So we have started that effort just to respond to that.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Renee, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think from a timeline perspective, if we pick a property, I think there's many steps that follow picking a property to secure it and make sure that it can be used for a school, whether, as Matt said, it needs to be voted to be taken out of open space to be used as a school, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if we have the time to do all of that. At this point, in my mind, our task was to determine the need for having a school and to put together a plan. The details as to how that is implemented, I just don't see how we have the time or resources to accomplish that.
If I could, the only concern is we're going to submit a grant application for June. We have to know where we're going to go. In addition to town council, I understand what Matt's saying, but we're going to go to the state. We can't go to them and not know where we're going. I don't think they'll put us on the list, in my opinion. We'll have to have some a parcel or two potentially candidates for it. If we could probably submit it, and if we're still vetting it, if it's town owned, if you're going to purchase a parcel, it would require 2 independent appraisals within 6 months of purchase. I know in order to maintain any eligibility for such purchase. We've tackled that with them before. But if you're going to go this June to a new parcel, I think they'd want to know where you're going to go. I think maybe during this, maybe I'll recall kind of some of my summations. Maybe in the next couple of weeks while Malone's doing that, we can take a deeper dive on this and discuss this a little bit further while they're doing that. Make good use of the time. Just a suggestion.
Got it. Thanks, Chuck. Tony, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I think Matt mentioned Cheshire Park. So the last study that was done, when the plan was submitted to the town council, the board of the committee had a list of properties, mostly town owned. And right after that plan was given to the town council, we immediately talked about potential sites. Cheshire was one of them. And then in the course of those discussions, then town manager Mike Malone did do some analysis into the deed and extend that property. And there might be the point is there's some history there, if that's even an option. So we can get an answer to that. I do know that we had to have a site picked for that grant application if we're going to go. So what I would recommend is we have a list of public properties that we reviewed a while ago. Maybe one of the things we can do, I think Charles alluded to this, is let's see what's viable on that list and cross off what's not. At least have something, to work with. So by the time this gets to the town council, if there is a town-owned property that may fit and may work, at least they can see those options. I would also say it'd be worthwhile to look into and research what private commercial properties might be able to purchase too. I think we did that in 2016, but I don't recall if they had a list. I mean, either way, that work has got to get done before the grant is submitted. And to Matt's point, if you recall, when the last facility master plan was presented, there was a lot of public questions about the site location and question on traffic and concerns. And, the voters are absolutely going to want to know a site location, at least a couple of options. So maybe, Jen, and Chuck, we reach out to Rob and see how he wants to handle that. You know, we expect that maybe there's some other town council work that would do that after we submit, or if he wants us to do it, we can. So I think it's prudent for us to just cross off what's not feasible on the public properties. That would be a start with something, in my opinion. So.
Go ahead, Kate.
The reason I brought it up is because, you know, I heard that the reason it didn't pass the last time was because the town council didn't feel that the plan was complete. And so I don't want to leave a question mark on the plan and have it fail for the same reason. That's a concern. Is there a possibility, I'm not in real estate, it's not my area, but is there a possibility of having a subcommittee of people on this committee who might have some experience in that background to look with Chuck and work on that?
I think anything's possible, yeah. I mean, if we think we need to take a deeper dive into the land, we've talked about this for last couple of meetings. I guess this is the furthest we've gone on it. So if we want to make a subcommittee for it, we can do that. Go ahead, Matt.
At this point, I would have Chuck Warrington scratch off the parcels that would not fit at all. And maybe the February 17th meeting, seeing as it's going to take 2 weeks for the census to be taken for the schools by Mylona McBroom, that maybe we should focus just on the land, and maybe Chuck could help us out as to exactly what pieces could be used and what pieces couldn't be used. And I'm going to mention this at the same time. If he's going to look at some properties, he needs to speak to the fire department and he needs to speak to the police department, because one of the sites that was chosen the last time, one of those people in power said that they would never, ever approve it where it was going unless it had a different exit and entrance, because he would not have it a school coming off a small road. So that really needs to be studied. So you need to do a little bit of due diligence as to what parcel it's going to be and run it up the flagpole with the fire department and the police department.
Great.
Does that sound good for the agenda for the next meeting? Sorry, Andrew. I see your hand.
I just wanted to throw out, like, as Matt was saying, I couldn't agree with him more on this, because, you know, there's been talk about potentially locating a new middle school, just say on the town-owned open space in the corner of Marion Road and Jarvis. There's no gas available there. So, I mean, that's a huge determining factor. If you're going to build a school of that size, there's no gas in order to fuel that school. So you're going to run it on, you know, there's those comments. And then also with with water pollution control, there's not a sewer line. So, I mean, how far is that sewer line? Where does that sewer line have to go? Where's the closest water main? I mean, all of that needs to be kind of thought about, because if you go throw a site out there and then you find out you can't develop it for the school, you know, we're gonna have an issue.
I agree.
Yeah, Chuck, I think in the previous studies, Malone SLR did a lot of legwork on this before, if I understand it correctly. It might be advantageous to tap into that knowledge versus going at it raw, and reinventing the wheel, if you will. If they have knowledge, and they're in Cheshire, so I think there's some local knowledge in the company anyways. But something we might want to consider, you know, if they have that knowledge, bring them on board to expedite a little bit and give us some of the history they might have, assuming that that's correct.
Go ahead, Matt.
Can we do that after, Chuck, after you've done an analysis and crossed off what certainly can't be used, and discuss this at the 17th meeting as to whether to bring them on board at that time or not?
Yeah, because just so you know, Matt, just to clarify, so, you know, in our analysis, depending on what's readily available to us, you know, again, like utilities, is there, you know, gas or not, and sewer, depending on what the information we have may or may not, you know, be available. So, but I think we could look at, the list and easily cross off some just based upon what we have. And then some may be question marks and some may be strong, and it might be a little bit of an iterative process. Might not be all in one swoop. We might have to do deeper dives, on some of them to go, are they? But yeah, absolutely. We don't need to bring them on right away. I just want to put that
Okay,
thought.
great. I'd just like to add to what Andrew said, because he certainly hit a point. If you're going to do this, I hit on fire and police. I think the planning department should be brought into it, and the wetlands, which is part of the planning department, should be added to that list of what you're going to, cross off or decide on.
Yeah, because you're gonna have to submit an 824 to planning and zoning anyways
Right.
for this, so better off having them on board early.
Good so a discussion for the next meeting. Chuck, you'll have a list of short list of places that maybe we could talk through a little bit more. And then we can get into the land piece of this, I guess, over the next couple weeks while we wait for my loan.
Okay.
Everybody good with that? Go ahead, Jen.
Just to clarify, we're only talking about town-owned property at this point, right?
Tell me, I
That's
think
all I have
if
for
we
a
talked
list,
about
so.
private-owned property, it'd have to be,
Executive session. I just wanted to make
Executive.
sure. Yeah.
I mean, we could
Could we
we
add an
include that
executive
on the next
session?
meeting?
Yeah, just in case.
Yes, we can. But I just want to make sure that Chuck is aware that if you have that list, if there's any, we can't talk about it in the public. So just make sure that list is only town-owned property. And then
Yeah, I'm only using
maybe
the
a second
list
list.
that Sean Kimball gave to us, the public owned.
Okay, great.
Yeah, nothing other than that.
Arnett?
Very good.
I will put together from the various departments in town hall all of the information that we have on those town-owned properties that don't have restrictions that might be viable. And we can get that as soon as possible. It won't be till early next week, but we can get that to the committee and make sure that Chuck Warrington and compadres all have that information instead of reinventing the wheel on some of it. So we'll get that out as soon as we can.
Arnett, are you referring to which ones have restrictions or not, or actually like utilities and stuff?
Both.
Okay, because we have the list. Sean gives the one that have conservation funding
Right.
restrictions. We have that stuff, but if you have anything on utilities, that
Yeah, we'll get you the utilities, the gas lines. Yeah, we'll get you all that information. That just might take a couple days.
Great,
but
thank
we'll do
you.
it.
No problem.
Great, thanks, Arnett. All right. Moving on, Jen, you want to is there public comment, Arnett, any?
No, there is not.
Very good. And John, it's up to date from the last time, right? So we're good.
Correct, Chuck. I do not have any more entries since the last meeting.
Very good. And then the next meeting will be a week from tonight, 7 o'clock, same Zoom place.
We had discussed last week about talking about the presentation. Obviously, we're going to hold off on that until we determine what our next steps are. So and what we're doing. So that piece wasn't included tonight and probably won't be discussed next time either. So the next meeting, we can talk about location.
Very good. Go ahead, Don.
Do you think at this point we should, I don't know if we had told the town council we'd be presenting on the 8th, or do you want to wait because I don't think we're going to be ready by the 8th, honestly. So do you think we should request a longer time?
I would think maybe we could wait till next week and kind of see how long we think maybe it's going to take from Chuck's end and my loan's end, and then come up with a date to push it to then, if need be.
Yeah, that
okay.
And then it'd give us enough time to go back to the town and let them know.
Sounds good.
We had talked last week about possibly moving that 1st to the 9th because of the day the meeting had fell on or falls on. Arnett, was there any follow-up on that?
Yes, I had checked with the council chairman, and he was fine with the council receiving some sort of a summary written report, executive summary in their packets, which would be March
9th.
5th. No, the packets would have to go out March 5th, which is a Friday. And then the presentation on the council meeting at March 9th. And that was absolutely fine. It made sense because the council wouldn't do anything with it other than review it on March 1st. So that was acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, only because I think a week later is when we start our budget talk. So we're going to be swamped the week after that.
Budget's due March 10th, the day after the 9th. Yes. Going to be busy, Don.
Yeah, I know.
So we can talk timeline, maybe meeting next week and decide what we need to do there. Is that good, everybody? Very good.
Good.
And with that, we have gotten through the agenda, I guess. Is there a motion
Move
to
to
adjourn?
adjourn.
Do we have a second? Very good. Thanks, Jim. That is it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
All right. Have a good night.
Everyone, thank you all very much for your time.